Okay, Sarah asked, this may be a stupid question. However, some bishops have suggested we may be in the end times. Do you think this is possible? What part of the prophecy of Our Lady of La Salette are we in? Well, that's always an intriguing question. I'm sure it gets asked every generation. We're not the first, because a lot of the things that we are going through have been gone through before in various centuries of the church. The church has been up and down in 20 centuries. She's had very good times, and then she's had very bad times. And whatever the times that we've been in, we've been able to come through it. And here we are today, 2,000 years later. But of course, today, I think the question is being asked a lot more than it was in previous times. I think that's a fact. So the question would be then, why is that? Why are people thinking that we're in the end times? Well, I could write you a list as long as my arm, probably both arms, as to why that is the case today. I'm not going to go through each thing, but even was it Pope John, Paul II said, that we're heading into times that are unlike any other time in the church's history, and the devil is attacking the church unlike he has ever done before, and blah, 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 blah. Pope Paul VI said the smoke of Satan has entered through a crack in the church. Things like, I think Benedict himself, when he was Pope, Benedict XVI, said things along those lines. We've had a number of theologians. Usually these are more conservative theologians. The liberal theologians, most of them don't even believe there's an end of time in the sense that you and I do. They don't believe there's going to be a second coming of Christ. They don't believe there's going to be a resurrection of the dead. All kinds of weird ideas. And this is probably one of the reasons why a lot of conservative Catholics believe that we're nearing the end, because we have the majority of Catholicism is liberal today. And those people just don't believe the same things traditionally that we believed about heaven, hell, the last four things. Boy, that's the gospel. And if you don't have that in your teaching, if you don't believe those things anymore, then we really don't believe in Christianity. Okay. So there's a lot of false Christianity out there, wherein these very liberal theologians just try to basically talk their way out of all the doctrines that we had believed in tradition. Okay. So there's another reason, why a lot of people think so. Then we have, like you mentioned, we've had La Salette, we've had Fatima, we've had Quito, Ecuador, and we've had more Marian apparitions in the 20th century, probably than all the other centuries combined. Okay, so, there's another reason, and each message is very similar, at least the ones that have been approved. They have been very similar. And they say the same thing. There will be a disruption in the church unlike we've ever seen. There will be doctrines that will be rejected like we've never seen. And that's what we're seeing today by leaps and bounds. Okay. We've seen in different avenues of academics and the sciences, we've seen them reach a point now, whether it's physics, chemistry, quantum mechanics, astronomy, mathematics, where they have reached the end of their rope, so to speak, where they have accumulated so much data that they really don't understand it. They really don't know how to connect the dots, as we say, and make sense of it all. The more knowledge they get, the more confused they get. Now, although we have reached plateaus where we can invent the cell phone and the computer and all those things, but they're pretty simple actually when you stand back and look at them and you see how they're really working. Once we came into the digital age, all the mystery was taken out of it. It's just a lot of zeros and ones all combined very fast. And, that's why everything works so well and so fast for us, because somebody just simplified it down to zeros and ones and put them all together. And depending on what machine you put them in, it's going to act accordingly. Okay. But I'm talking about the whole understanding of the cosmos and humankind, like even psychology. We've been through how many phases of psychology, psychiatry, and how the mind of man works. And they've reached an end of their rope. They can't explain anything. It's just a mystery to them, basically. They know certain things, but nobody's really been able to put it all together. And especially, in my work in science and physics and dealing with the whole what goes around what thing, can you believe it or not? That's coming up to the fore again. We thought we had conquered that, 400 years ago with Galileo and Copernicus. And all of a sudden we find out, well, maybe they just got the whole thing backwards, because, we've assumed all this data and, we can't make sense out of it. It could be this or that or the other thing. And we have, quantum mechanics where it's saying that electrons and protons speak to each other from long distances and perform the same tasks without even knowing. We don't even know how they would communicate with one another. That's spooky. Okay. So in other words, we're just reaching a point in society where everything's coming to a head, and, something's going to give somewhere someday. And same thing with religion, Christianity. It just seems like everything's coming to a head. The world itself is 7 point something billion people. Okay, how many more it can sustain? Who knows? But we're reaching that limit where we're, all the nations have received the gospel, as Jesus said in Matthew 23:14. This gospel we preach into all the world, and then the end shall come. Well, we pretty much reached that point. Okay, it's basically, where we, just a century ago, we would not be able to communicate with somebody in Australia or Africa or whatever. And now you can communicate with them with 2 keystrokes. And so that's all changed. So, that's what I mean when it's coming to a head, and there's no more room basically to advance mankind, so to speak, because they've come to this point of no return. And then we see the gospel being preached to all the world. Well, that's another sign. Okay. And by the way, it's got to end sometime. It's not going to go on forever and ever. So obviously, we're waiting for that day. And of course, we're nearer that day than any other time before us. So we would be asking these questions with a lot more frequency than the people before us, although they did as well. But as I said, someday it's got to end. All right. And you had 2,000 years for the Old Testament, from say Abraham to Jesus. Okay. It's a little bit more than 2,000. You had another 2,000 or 3,000 before the time of Abraham. And so it's adding up. You have 3,000 before Abraham, 2,000, and then we have our 2,000. That's like 7,000 years. Okay. That sounds like a reasonable time where things would come to the end and it would all be over. Because we haven't been here for millions of years. That is total malarkey. And so we can't base how long we're going to live into the future based on how many years we were here before that. Because if that were the case, then we'd go on for another million years, until the end. That's not going to happen. Okay. If we go by biblical time, we got about 6,000 or 7,000 years at the most, and anything plus or minus that, we don't know. Okay. We have no idea what the exact day is. We never will. Even the Son of Man, as Jesus says, doesn't know that time and season that God has exclusively given to himself. But we know it's coming, and it's by all the signs that we look at, and there's many more signs that I could give, that we are possibly very close to that time. Okay. And so all the more reason do we have to do what's right, continue in our Christian faith, and convince others that there's no hope outside Christianity. This is it. And someday we're all going to stand before God's judgment seat. Okay, that is the truth. That is the gospel. And it's going to happen sooner than later, I believe.